So today we're going to focus on developing adaptive expertise, and I promise there's no neuroscience, so that's good for me and for you. So we're going to talk about something that we've been working on at IRIS for the last kind of 6 months, and it's going to tie in as well with what Hailey was talking about with agency. But we're really proud of what we've created. I'm going to kind of take you through why we've created it and what we kind of have created for you. So when we think about instructional coaching, it doesn't always lend itself to the idea of adaptive expertise. But when I've been talking to trusts and schools, this idea of adaptive expertise keeps coming up. I keep hearing the same kind of story where teachers are doing techniques and the leaders are dropping into lessons. They might be doing a learning walk, or they might have coaching in their school. And what they're seeing is that teachers are doing the techniques, but not necessarily at the right time and for the right reason. So we wanted to focus the instructional coaching and the design for the platform on IRIS around building adaptive expertise. So we're going to go into what adaptive expertise is and why it's important to start with, and then I'm going to show you the model that we have developed. So first of all, what is kind of the end goal for the teachers that we train? I'm not sure how well you can see this, so I'm going to read it out. Teachers who have the knowledge, skills, and disposition to improve in an environment that affords them the agency to do so. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially what it's saying is skills are really important. The actions teachers take are really important. They need to have those tools in their toolbox, but they also need the knowledge to be able to use them at the right time and for the right reasons. But they also need to understand that the environment they work in is complex. Anyone who has tried to create a lesson plan, probably when you started out teaching that was like minute by minute things that you were going to do, very quickly find that it's out of the window within the first 5 minutes. And that's because teaching happens in a complex environment where cause and effect is not that easy to predict, where things go off into different directions very quickly. So we need teachers that appreciate all of that, and we need to train teachers so that they can. So the end goal for us is that we need teachers who have a really deep understanding of different domains that are applicable to them, like the subject, the curriculum, their students, etc. They have to have that toolbox, that repertoire of teaching techniques. They must be able to do it at the right time for the right reason, which involves having situational awareness, being able to spot the cues that suggest that you should do something in a different way, or that a different technique is needed. And we need to foster that motivation to improve, because you can't stand still in teaching. You can't stand still because everything is always changing. At the very least, your students are changing. Your classes change. Sometimes the curriculum changes. Depending on the political environment, influences from that will change the way that you teach. So there's always change, so you're not able to stand still. So we need teachers that appreciate that and that are supported to improve. And I think this quote from Andy, which I've mentioned a couple of times already, is an incredibly powerful and simple way of putting it. I use this quote all of the time now, because it sums up the idea that we do need teachers to have a toolbox of techniques, and instructional coaching should help them to do that. But it's also got to help them to be adaptive. So we need to dig into what adaptive expertise is. So we can understand adaptive expertise by contrasting it to routine expertise. And in some jobs, routine expertise is fine. Routine expertise is getting really good at certain procedures and being able to do them really efficiently. And that works well. In fact, in parts of teaching, it's really important to have those efficient procedures as well. But even in those routine elements of teaching, there are times where you have to adapt. So think of the strongest routines that your teachers and yourselves you have in your classrooms. Some of them might be the entry routine, or transitions between activities, or pair talk, whatever it is. And those routines really need to be on point, but you also need to adapt them. So in that entry routine, you need to be able to spot if a student's coming in and looking really low, or if someone's being slightly disruptive, so that you can deal with it. So routines are really important. In fact, they free us up to be able to be adaptive. And in teaching, we need to be adaptive because we've got 30 humans, not yet 30 robots in front of us. So routine expertise is that efficiency of doing things in a routine way. Adaptive expertise is that efficiency in doing things in a routine way and having the situational awareness to spot when to be adaptive, and then the tools that enable you to be adaptive appropriately. So you can just see adaptive expertise as taking in all the benefits of routine expertise and being able to respond appropriately. And there's a nice quote here from Kavanagh, who studied judgment, teacher judgment.
So can you read it out?
Yeah, let me read it out for you. Where routine expertise involves the efficient and precise execution of predetermined behaviours, adaptive expertise involves the thoughtful and innovative exercising of judgment in practice. So if we think about instructional coaching, it's got to do both. It's got to help people to develop techniques that they can use in a really useful way, but it's also got to develop their ability to be thoughtful and innovative to exercise judgment. Now that all sounds to me quite sort of airy-fairy. What do we mean by this and what does it look like? So we've really spent the last kind of 6 months thinking about this. And it's really a different way of viewing the role of a teacher. It's not seeing a teacher as a technician of certain techniques, even though they need those techniques. It's helping them to really retain that professionalism around the way they make decisions in their classroom. So if you think about coaching, coaches drop in and probably see 0.01% of a teacher's teaching, a very tiny part. They're a really valuable role, coaches, but they also need to think about the fact that they're not seeing that class teach all of the time. They have to be able to tap into the teacher's reasons for making decisions as they do. We need teachers, because of that adaptive nature that they need to have, we need teachers that are always kind of seeking and solving those novel problems as they come up. And that links back to Hailey's point around agency. If we don't think about agency in coaching, then we're not equipping teachers to be able to be innovative and to solve those problems when we're not around. So coaching that just focuses on techniques and doesn't focus on when to use them is going to leave a teacher floundering when the coach isn't there. So we've got to have both. And we touched on why teachers need adaptive expertise when I mentioned that point around lesson plans and making those lesson plans that very quickly go out of the window. We can't have specific lesson plans that say exactly what the teacher's going to do on a minute-by-minute basis because the environment is so complex. And what do we mean by that? Well, often it's quite difficult to work out cause and effect when it comes to teaching. If we are having students who don't understand something, is it because our explanation was poor? Is it because their prior knowledge was weak? Is it because they had a poor explanation last year and actually you're building on really flaky kind of prior knowledge? It can be really difficult to work out that cause and effect. And that makes it tricky to improve. If you don't know what's causing your problem, then how do you know how to solve it? And this is a characteristic of a complex environment. You get this ambiguity. Why has this happened? Linked to this, it's therefore really difficult to work out what consequence your actions are going to have. So as a coach, you can suggest that a teacher tries this action out, you can rehearse it together, but you can't be exactly certain that it's going to solve the problem. Because we work in a complex environment, that teacher needs to be able to take that technique, go into their classroom, into their lessons, and they also need to be able to make decisions about how to tweak the usage of it, adapt to the usage of it. And if coaching doesn't support that ability to make decisions and adapt, then we're making it quite difficult for our teachers. So the main takeaway is that teachers need that adaptive expertise because the environment is so complex. But we have looked at what kind of underpins the adaptive expertise that some teachers have. So there are some teachers who are really quite expert and have this kind of fluid adaptive expertise. You go in and watch them teach and it's like they are tuned into everything. And you've probably seen them at this it's very kind of obvious which ones that you want to send. You know, there's teachers that are struggling with behaviour management and you might send them in to see another teacher teach. And it looks a bit like magic. So you can imagine Hailey, 20 years in, expert at behaviour management. And she's sort of fluidly walking around the room. And if she senses that a student's going to be problematic in any way, she might just move towards them. It's a really subtle thing that these teachers do to adapt to the situations that they see. So subtle that it almost looks like magic. And there's no point in sending the trainee to see Hailey because they can't work out what it is that she's doing. So that adaptive expertise, we've looked into kind of what is underpinning that. What do we need to develop in those teachers that are kind of newer to the profession or maybe need to kind of think about how to be adaptive in certain areas? And the answer cognitively seems to be mental models. So this is a term that's used quite a lot. It's often quite interchangeably used with the term schema. And essentially, it's just a construct. You can't crack open someone's skull and point to their mental model. It's not a physical thing, but it's a construct for understanding how people think. And this is what we think might underpin the decision making of really effective teachers. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what mental models are, and then I'm going to give you a chance to share some of your expert mental models. So mental models are essentially the interface between what we know and the environment. We kind of see the world through our mental models. And what mental models do is they magnify important aspects of the environment for our goals, and they filter other ones out. So right now, the things being magnified for me are the expressions on your faces, which, you know, I'm trying to see, is anyone falling asleep? Are people enjoying it? And things that I'm not focusing on are, you know, well, now I am, but the traffic outside, for example. So things that I can filter out. So if you think about in teaching, the things that we magnify if we're a really good teacher will be in relation to the instructional goals. So if I've just set my students off on pair work, think about the things that I'm magnifying. I'm looking around the room and I'm checking that everyone has someone to speak to, that everyone is either looking as if they're listening or speaking, etc. So great teachers have strong mental models of different teaching situations that focus them on the right stuff and filter out the stuff that's less important. And we know this because research has shown that if you put a more expert teacher and a novice teacher and give them the same video clip of the lesson to look at, the novice focuses on the shiny shoelaces of some of the students, things that aren't particularly important. And the expert focuses on things that are relevant to their instructional goals. So better mental models are better at magnifying and filtering the important and unimportant aspects in relation to goals. We've talked a little bit about causal relationships and how difficult they are in complex environments. Well, actually, better teachers have a better sense of causal relationships. And I want to give you a kind of non-teaching example to start with. We all have a mental model of how to cross a road. We all have a mental model of how to cross a road. My little boy does not have a mental model of how to cross a road. I am not going to let my little 1.5-year-old toddle up to the curb and try and cross a road. That would be terrible. But we do. We know that you stand near the curb. If it's raining, you might stand back a little bit so you don't get splashed. We know that you'll look both ways and you'll judge whether or not you can get to the other side safely. That's your mental model of how to cross a road. It contains cause and effect. If I step out too soon and there's a car coming, that would not be good for me. I can judge that there's enough of a distance, I can walk out. Cause and effect. So the best teachers' mental models contain really good cause and effect. And you can see it's like they know their students and their subject inside out. When they want to ask a question to a student, they'll know just how to phrase it so that that student can answer. So if I'm going to ask Poppy, I know that she's going to be able to cope with this complex question, so I can ask it in this particular way. Cause and effect. But I want to ask Poppy this question, I think she's going to struggle, so I'm going to put a bit more support and scaffolding into that question. Cause and effect. So the best teachers have mental models that are really situation sensitive. They've got these really sort of baked into them, they've got these like causal relationships. And that's what we're trying to develop through coaching. They're also dynamic, these mental models. They can be run, and this is what helps with judgment. So you think about the crossing the road example again. I can run my mental model and play out what might happen if I step out right now. It's not going to be good, so I'm not going to do it. So the fact that I can run my mental model, press play on it, means I can make a better decision. Wait for a minute. And that's the same with teaching. Because teachers can play out what might happen, they can make better decisions. Anyone who's ever tried to plan a lesson for their students off someone else's PowerPoint slides has done a lot of this mental simulation. They'll look at a slide and they'll go, no, 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 no. That will not work for my students. Really good teachers, it feels like intuition, but actually the research suggests that intuition might be a very quick playing of your mental model. If I do this, my class can't cope, I'm going to do this activity in a different way, or I'm going to scrap it altogether. So the best mental models have got these causal relationships, and they can be run, they're nice and dynamic, and that's called simulation, mental simulation. Let's play out what might happen. It's potentially a really nice tool for coaches to use, mental simulation. If you decide on a technique with your teacher, you can say, okay, like play this out then. If you do this, what do you think the effect's going to be on this group of students? What do you think the effect's going to be on this particular student, etc.? So you can use that mental simulation. There's some early research, small study that suggests that mental simulation is used by better coaches. So I'm going to change slide in a minute, but I'm going to give you a scenario so you can get your mental models out there, because I can see on your faces you're really wanting to share your own mental models. So I'm going to show you a scenario and some questions. And what I'd like you to do on your tables is to talk through the scenario and talk through the questions, thinking about whatever choice you make, trying to simulate it. What do you think the effect of this choice will be? What do you think the effect of this other option will be, etc. So I'm going to give you a second just to read this slide, and then I'm going to reiterate the instructions again. Okay, so you've got your scenario and you've got your options. I'd like you to, even if you dismiss an option immediately, I'd still like you to try to think about why you've dismissed it. So simulate, why have I dismissed that one? What might happen that I'm not happy with? You also probably don't have as much information about the scenario as you would like. So just think about what information, extra information you would like. And we know with all good talk tasks that to keep people on track, you need a bit of accountability. So I will be cold calling people when we come back together. So make sure you write some notes. so that you're ready to be called upon. I'm going to give you 4.5 minutes to talk in your groups. Off you go. Is it clear what you're doing? Have I explained that well enough?
No, it's fine.
You sure?
She's seeking clarity from someone else. So having an understanding of that, then I can add my explanation further.
Exactly.
I'm just listening in rudely.
Yeah, but in terms of context, if you're someone who is to actually come to lessons, quite a lot of some other stuff going on at the moment, it might be that in that circumstance, you would be delaying the lesson while waiting for Kira to hit.
That's why I would do year 3 though, in that it's very
Oh,
different.
sorry, I see what you mean.
It's different to
Ignoring,
ignore it for
fair
now
enough.
and then have
Yeah.
a quiet conversation with her. To not say
Absolutely.
it
So that because one suggested there's no follow-up whatsoever.
exactly.
So agree.
But the middle one,
Be a trigger for volatility, or it could be distress, or it could be overstimulation and I just need a quiet place because I can't stay still. So actually that might just give me the time to take the information in. And that's why I thank them for following the instruction. But then I'd be aware of, I'd need to know the person, because if I did that, that could come across sarcastic and then it could escalate.
What did you say over here? What were your thoughts?
it's so hard to say without knowing
It is. There's extra information that's needed. What kind of information would you want to know?
what happened before that warning, definitely. The rest of the class, we would say, it definitely depends whether it's secondary or primary, but in secondary school, you might not want to stop the whole learning because there might be children that will take that opportunity to start to do other things and get distracted. So you might want to continue and then deal with that behaviour.
So listen to that wonderful cause and effect, isn't it, that great teachers have? They know that they have to create this cover. They can't just focus in on one student to the behest of the others, because cause and effect. So that mental model that you want to build in those teachers. So what did you go for in the end? What did you pick? Or have you not picked yet? See if you can.
So it does depend.
Okay, we're going to come back together in 3, in 2, and finishing your conversations in 1. Thank you. So we're going to take a little bit of feedback on this. So I'd like to hear what you went for and your simulation. So what I mean by that is what you think would happen if you picked that option and kind of why you picked that option. And any other information that you think you would need. So let's go for this table.
Two of us initially were gravitating towards number 3, and it shows that because we'll tweak it a little bit. There's option 4/3, which is maybe thanking Kira for the acknowledgement of being quiet first of all and paying attention again, but maybe addressing the secondary behavior later on after Kira's had a time to calm down. And we thought that would be best for 2 reasons really. One, not losing face publicly with the dynamic of the group. It doesn't slow down the pace of the lesson necessarily, but also then you can unpick any other underlying things that are going on there which are linked to the reason she was actually whispering in the first place, which could have been a misconception of something you'd said before. Asking for clarity. Maybe she lost her bus pass and was asking her friend if she'd found it or seen it. I mean, there's a myriad of things. So actually, our goal is to go back to it later and check in with Kira and see if she's all right.
Yeah.
But also, we've had number 2 as a possibility, because in a school where the culture is track the teacher, arms on the desk kind of thing, we're not going to move on until we're all doing that. That could potentially be an important thing to do, to then go on to number 3. That was our navigation there.
And what's your name, sorry?
Aaron.
Aaron. Okay, so Aaron's just shared the group's kind of decision there, but listen to the richness of the mental model that sits behind it. A new teacher's mind would be absolutely blown. Think about all the things that Aaron just took into account when making that decision, or Aaron and his group. Not losing face, so that maintaining that authority in the classroom, not slowing down learning time, being a critical consideration, and wanting to unpick the issue with Kira and find out why. But then also thinking about how whole school systems can sometimes trump everything because we need that consistency, therefore maybe number 2. So the richness of this decision making, if we just focus on action, we are not training our teachers to make better decisions for the right reasons. So back to Andy's quote. So that richness of the mental model, it might feel like this huge thing, but how can we share our mental models and get across to teachers how to make those kind of better decisions? Now we've taken one mental model. Does anyone want to volunteer one from their group? Maybe they picked something else, or maybe they picked the same thing for different reasons, or do they want to add anything? Who wants to share? Yes, go ahead.
I think we had a very similar discussion. If we were going to go for 2, we talked about it's really important the way in which you did that. So you might be waiting for Kira to sit up, but you might take that opportunity to narrate the positive as to something else somebody else is doing at that point. So you're not being passive aggressive to Kira. You're not necessarily putting the spotlight on her or saying, I'm waiting for you, or eyeballing in quite a direct way. So depending upon the relationship that you have with Kira, and possibly the relationship she has with being in a classroom and being confronted about her behaviour, you could be making decisions in terms of the way that you did that. Do you do it in a non-verbal way? Do you do it in an authoritative way? Are you going to take the attention away from Kira to give her the opportunity, but sort of put the spotlight elsewhere in that time?
Yeah, which really highlights the importance of context, doesn't it? All the contextual features that teachers are taking into account, which again, if we just focus on action and not context, are we really building teachers' mental models about how to make decisions? Possibly not. Listen to all of the context that you took into account. The table at the back, we're also talking about history. I want to know what's just happened. I want to know about this student. So the fact that complex systems always have history. Students bring a history about how they feel about your lesson, how they feel about the school. Teachers bring histories with them to the classroom. And we have to kind of unpick that as well in complex systems. So thank you for sharing your very expert mental models, and hopefully that gets across the importance of the decision making that goes behind doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. So what we've done at IRIS is we've tried to kind of build this idea of building mental models into the coaching model that's on the platform. And it's not too dissimilar to any coaching models that you might be using at the moment, and that's deliberate. We don't want people to throw out what they're doing and start all over again. So this might be kind of some tweaks to what you're doing at the moment. But essentially, I'll just give you a second to, or actually, I'll read them out. So L is learn from success. So that's usually the kind of praise element of coaching. Then in E, we examine the challenge, kind of what's happened. If you think about that scenario I just showed you, it's about examining what happened and why. Then A is for action steps. We really want to focus on changing behaviour as well as decision making. So we've got to focus on a nice granular step, have that time to rehearse it. And N is nurture, not just because it fits nicely with the acronym, but because it's the idea that you're not just embedding something, you're going to need to make tweaks to what you do when you take it into the real life classroom environment. And that N, thankfully, ChatGPT did have a role in that N, I must say, but it fits nicely, I think. So this is the model we're using, and I just want to show you one example of where it's kind of a slight tweak. So most models of coaching have got this praise element, where we tell people what they've done well, and we're trying to reinforce that behaviour for next time. So we might say, it was effective when you used cold call, you put the name last, and that meant everyone had to think. So you're basically trying to reinforce that behaviour so the teacher does it next time. But what we're saying is that learn from success is a slight tweak to that. It's not just telling the teacher what they've done well, but it's checking that they understand why they do it and when they do it. We don't want teachers with that inflexible use of the technique that think it's always right to cold call. We want them to understand when and why. Right thing, right time, right reason. So we might ask questions, and the IRIS Learn model prompts us to ask questions such as this.
Can I ask a question? So
Yes, please.
It's interesting because we've got teachers coming out of college and university now. That latter bit which you mentioned about making the right thing at the right time and understanding why they made those decisions. Do you feel that has changed in terms of depth, understanding that importance of understanding why a decision was made, rather than routinely doing it because that's what you're taught to do?
I feel like we have, like with everything, when we try and push something in another direction, we sometimes go too far. So I feel like we had a lot of professional development when I started teaching that was just talking, and we never did anything, and we didn't change our practice. So we had what has been coined the knowing-doing gap. We know what we should be doing, but we don't go and do it. We're not changing teachers' practice. And then we had a push towards behavioural science. So we had the EEF mechanisms report, which is brilliant. I was, well, shouldn't sing my own praises, but I was part of that report, so I would say it was brilliant, but I do think it was really useful. But a lot of that came from behavioural science. It was from the Mitchie mechanisms, which was a group of behavioural scientists who were saying what it was that changed behaviour. And a lot of those mechanisms, not all, but a lot came from there. And I think that's right for closing the knowing-doing gap. We cannot let down teachers by just talking at them and not getting them to actually change their practice. That's really important. So I think the next step is to also think about the knowing, deciding, doing gap. How are we helping them with their decision making? So I think we're trying to kind of push things a little bit more in that direction. So yeah, so here are some of the questions that you're kind of prompted to ask. And I think what it does is two things. It supports the teacher to think about right time, right reason. But it also means that your coaches need to do that as well. I've been working with coaches over the last couple of years, and being a coach is just as good professional development for them as it is for the teacher. So this is going to take some kind, like it's going to help coaches to kind of upskill themselves as well. So imagine that the coach has asked those questions of a teacher. They've asked them, why did you choose to use cold call them? What features of the technique did you use effectively? What effect did it have on students? When wouldn't you use cold call? So that's a good question. When wouldn't you? What are the boundary conditions of this technique? Otherwise, we risk overgeneralizing. So imagine those questions have been asked, and then I'm going to show you on the next slide the response that the coach got. And I just want you to think, I'm going to give you a second to read it in a minute. Will this teacher use the technique at the right time for the right reason? Based on what they've said, do you think that they will do that, and how do you know? So have a read and then turn to the person next to you and just answer this question, please. Off you go. Yeah. So I'm just going to pop back to the questions. Essentially, they're checking, they're checking some understanding of cause and effect, and has this teacher done the right thing for the right reason? Do they understand when they should do it? And then this was the response. Do we think the coach should be like, yeah, they understand how to use it at the right time for the right reasons? Or is there any kind of red flags in their answer, do you think? Turn to the person next to you or on your table, see what you think. I'll give you just 3 minutes for this one. Okay, coming back together in 3, in 2, finishing your conversations, please, in 1. Okay, listening in, there are some things that are kind of giving us a sense that this teacher kind of is doing things doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. But there are some tables that I was kind of floating around who are saying, I'd want to dig more into that. I need to check that a little bit more because that isn't what my mental model essentially is of using cold call. So this is really important stuff. You're now thinking about developing decision making rather than just perhaps developing action, if that was what you were doing before. If you already think about developing decision making, perhaps this has made it a bit more strategic what you would ask. Is it being done? Is the right thing being done at the right time for the right reason? And these answers that people give can really tell us, like, what do we need to ask next? And crucially, which part of my mental model do I need to share? Because it's not just about asking questions. We don't want to hide the ball. We want to share our expertise. We want to share our thinking. Okay, so we're going to link this back to Hailey's talk around agency. If teachers understand that the environment is complex, that cause and effect isn't easy, that making decisions and doing something isn't necessarily definitely going to lead to the outcome that they think, then they appreciate that ambiguity and unpredictability that are inherent in the classroom environment. And therefore, they see the need to really develop their decision making. It's not just about being a technician and having lots of tools that you can use. I have to actually develop my decision making too. And with support in that area comes agency. If I am able to make appropriate decisions, and I know why I'm making those appropriate decisions because my coach and I have worked on it, then we're moving towards agentic professionals who are doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. We're also enabling them to behave as they need to behave in a complex environment, which is experimentation. Teachers can't always just do the same things all the time. They have to be able to adapt. And there's an element of innovation and experimentation within there. And Hailey was talking about how in those environments of high trust, then there's that risk taking is there and they're able to do that. So it's all kind of linked in together. In order to behave well and to succeed in complex environments, agency and trust are necessary. Otherwise, you'll just have teachers who think they have to behave in exactly the same way. And when you come to observe them, it will be very performative and you won't be seeing someone who can flex. So this approach is one that we are hoping will also support with agency. Here's a summary of what we've kind of talked about today. And if you want to read a lot about adaptive expertise in general, and developing expertise, we've got some really nice references here that you can read a little bit more about if you'd like to. But thank you so much for listening. I'm going to hand back to Hailey now, and yeah, hope it's been useful.